Each year, as we begin the holiday season in December, we celebrate the very best of the Solari Report. This coming week, in our second part, we publish our picks for the top selections from our Solari Report weekly interviews. In the following week, we will publish the news trends and stories analysis from our quarterly wrap-ups with Dr. Joseph P. Farrell. Throughout the year, we focused on the Going Direct Reset, approved by the G7 central bankers in August 2019, exploring numerous facets in our weekly interviews and special Solari reports. Our choices reflect this focus. In February, Marie McDonald joined me to discuss Your Mortgage, Avoiding Servicing Risks. I was concerned that Fed market interventions meant more mortgage fraud. This fraud is often combined with predatory lending and aggressive real estate acquisition. I wanted to make sure that our subscribers knew how to handle both mortgage originations and servicing in a predatory environment.
It is really those original documents that help us to distinguish whether or not a forged note is being presented to the court, either in a foreclosure action or civil litigation. So it's just vitally important. And in addition, of course, we really want people to keep every single monthly mortgage statement.
Right.
They should keep their real estate tax bills, their homeowners insurance premiums, and everything connected to the servicing of the mortgage loan. And to keep that from year to year in a file, and paper file as well as electronic file. The reason for that is that if there's a dispute over whether or not the servicer credited the borrower's mortgage payments, we can look back to those original authentic records to understand where the mortgage loan accounting stood at any given date. Whereas what's being produced these days by mortgage servicing companies as a payment history can be manipulated. So the borrower has to become their own document custodian.
They really do. You know, I can't tell you how often I've heard both from you and a variety of attorneys that they will ask for the basic documents, not just the documents issued at origination or at closing, but the last 10 years of payments, etc. And what the consumer doesn't realize is whether it's the courthouse, whether it's the mortgage company, whether it's the servicer, nobody else is keeping records. Or they're reserving the right to say, oh, well, after 3 years, we throw them out or whatever. If you don't have them, you can't depend on any other party to, number one, have them, even if they're not fraudulent, or two, if they are, you know, to not make it up. It was funny, before I called you today, one of my colleagues and I were just laughing about the stories of people who've had their houses foreclosed on, even though they didn't have a mortgage on their house. You know, and they have to prove that this fraudulent mortgage, you know, is non-existent. It's ridiculous. Marie returned, in fact, in the summer to update us on the specific COVID-19 mortgage issues. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Solari Report. Today, it's a great privilege to have Marie McDonald return. Marie is a mortgage fraud and forensic analyst. She's the president and CEO of McDonald Analytics, which is a litigation support and research firm, but she's helped some Solari Report subscribers with their mortgages and tricky situations. So she's an incredible research firm, offers all sorts of securities research and foreclosure forensic support, including to attorney general's courts, government agencies, and she's seen a lot of interesting litigation. We last had Marie on. First, she came on to talk with us about mortgage originations and how to make sure to originate your mortgage so that you don't get defrauded and you really achieve what you intend to achieve. And then I had her come back to do servicing, because you can do your origination perfectly and you can still run into trouble on servicing. And in fact, it's very important before you originate a mortgage that you know where the servicing troubles come in so you can avoid those kinds of companies or institutions. Not always possible, but it helps to know. Well, when the CARE Act passed and I heard about the forbearance programs, I knew how much harm had been done to people through forbearance programs and forbearance fraud during the bailouts, because Marie briefed us all about it and had some incredible case studies. I took one look and I sent her, I didn't even read the act yet. I just sent her an email and I said, Marie, will you come back on to the Solari Report? Because there's going to be trouble in the mortgage market and we need to protect our subscribers from it. So, Marie, you said immediately, yes, thank you so much for doing this. In May, John Titus joined me for Central Bank Stimulus Quantitative Easing 5.0 to review the Federal Reserve interventions in the market since the approval of the Going Direct plan. This discussion reflected our tracking of central bank and Treasury interventions in our stimulus tracker database for subscribers.
The implications of the bailouts were that there was no rule of law.
Right.
HSBC admitted to perpetrating all these crimes and nobody gets prosecuted. Nobody goes to jail.
Right.
Because there is a doctrine in the U.S. Attorney's Manual called collateral consequences. And if we prosecute HSBC, it'll be Chicken Little. The sky will fall and, the life as we know it will end. And that's where we are today. That is where all of this stuff with the pandemic is coming from.
Right. The pandemic stimulus is just another round of bailouts.
Right.
It is such a disadvantage when one group of people can print money out of thin air.
Yes.
So they have as much money as they want at a zero cost of capital.
And lend it out at interest.
Right. And lend it out at interest while we're paying 15.99% on average on our credit cards.
Right.
But clearly we're in a model that I would describe as not sustainable. And it's hugely destructive of productivity because the unproductive have found a way to increasingly subsidize them at the cost of everybody else.
Right. The ability of people to lend money out at interest is one problem. There's a second and maybe even more significant problem is that when you have debt-based money, the money creators have at their leisure the ability to contract the money supply at will and cause depressions.
Yeah, it caused fake scarcity.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that happened in 1920. It happened in 1929. That's what's going on now.
I agree with you. The more history we have on the monetary history, the more you can see this pattern over time.
Yes.
Yes.
That's the key thing, is being able to detect patterns by looking over time. Unfortunately, it's getting harder and harder to find books about the Depression and about 1920 or whatever than it was before. Google is not a friendly organization to history.
Right.
In a lot of ways, I think it's – no, I'm serious.
No, they're the neuralizer.
When you say that $21 trillion is missing, it's not that they want that money because they have the ability to print the money. It's
Right.
that they don't want you to have that money.
Right.
It's really a power grab. It's just dressed up in dollars.
Absolutely.
If you look at the history of depressions, the 1920 depression was about crushing farmers. The 29 depression, also intentionally created, was about crushing industrialists. And this one is about crushing small business and buying up businesses for pennies on the dollars. That's what's going on.
Right. In the Democratic states especially, they've rigged the unemployment compensation so it's approximately 30% more on average than what people were making at work. So they won't want to go back to work. And then they're planning on rolling that in July and then rolling it again in October in front of the election. And then after the election, if the Democrats can win, they're planning on converting it to a universal basic income.
Yeah, I would. Yeah.
If you look at all the things they've done to destroy small business, it's the last attack on small business and creating complete dependency.
It's okay to have more money and print a sea of money as long as you have the productivity to back it up. You have the business output. But if people are sitting at home twiddling their thumbs and they're on Twitter all day and on Facebook and watching YouTube videos, they're not working. They're not producing anything. We're going to see huge inflation if this nonsense continues.
Right. They created this Federal Accounting Standards Advisory Board Statement 56, which basically says, long and short, we can keep secret books. There's no sovereignty, and now they're basically saying, look, we can do whatever we want. We don't have to justify anything to you or tell you anything about what we're doing.
Right.
I always said I could have told Epstein he was a dead man as soon as they adopted FASB 56, because what it means is they can launder whatever they want, however they want.
Right.
There's another aspect to this which has become more and more important. The federal government doesn't have financial sovereignty, but it also doesn't have information sovereignty. So the president can't have a private conversation with the Prime Minister of Australia without 17 intelligence agencies listening and leaking it all to the Washington Post.
Right.
So you don't have information sovereignty. And because I have to say the Five Eyes system has sort of changed a little bit the balance of power between JP Morgan Chase and the, AT&T.
Right.
So there's a definite sort of telco defense contractor aspect to power, and then there's the central bank power.
Right.
But they don't have information sovereignty, and they don't have financial sovereignty. And we just had the Pentagon admit that 3 UFO videos are real, and so now they're admitting that they don't even control the airspace.
The sovereignty issue is a real issue because once you had the collateral consequences doctrine,
right.
The collateral consequences is the formal recognition that certain banks have criminal immunity. And if you have criminal immunity, you are de facto the sovereign, right?
Right. Okay, so global GDP, JP Morgan Chase says in the second quarter down 40% for US. Yeah, so Goldman came out and said down 25%, then JP Morgan said down 40%. We just saw a survey, I think by the Chamber of Commerce, saying 2/3 of business say if this keeps up for 6 months, they're gone. So 6 months from now, we could have 1/3 of the small businesses that were existing when it started. They're shutting down small business and then using their ability to listen to everybody on Zoom globally to sort of suck everything up into FANG and the big monopolies. I mean, basically, the Department of Justice has become a monopoly creator. What they do is they liquidate small business and foreign businesses into monopolies.
That's being spot on, yes.
And part of what we're watching is the materialist economy that makes no sense, is constantly on the lookout for more subsidy to keep itself going because it makes no sense. And this is their last desperate attempt to lock everything up so they can keep themselves going. I don't think it's going to work, but, a couple billion people could die in the process of getting it to fail.
Boy, that's a dark possibility, but it is a possibility nonetheless. I'm sorry to say. It's hard. I got to be honest. There are days where it's hard to see a good outcome from all of this.
I'm still an optimist because when I created Hamilton, I left the Bush administration. I said, these guys are going to get a hold of the technology and kill us all. We need another plan. So I went to work to figure out how, bottom up, you could create wealth and productivity bottom up in communities, basically an optimization of total equity in place. And what I discovered is the potential for economic wealth, if we were capable of civilization, is just fantastic.
That's exactly right. And one of the things about the 21 trillion and 29 trillion missing is that's really a testament to that they could steal all this money because the system is so productive.
Isn't it incredible?
In its innate form. If you left it alone, the wealth would be just mind-boggling.
Right. In August, when I finished the publication of The State of Our Currencies, I published a new introduction and overview in The State of Our Currencies Take 2. The State of Our Currencies is the single best description of the global financial reset available, an essential map to help you understand what is happening today. In September, Sally Fallon Morell joined me to discuss her new book, co-authored with Dr. Tom Cowan, The Contagion Myth: Why Viruses, including coronavirus, are not the cause of disease. You will find both Sally and Tom honored as Solari pandemic heroes in the second quarter 2020 wrap-up. One of the things that was hard for me, and it took a lot of reading and research to grapple with, is how could the germ theory have gone on for so long?
I know.
And I have to compliment you, and Tom, you're much more polite about it. You call it a mistake, I call it a moneymaker, because if you look at how often this has been used to, protect the insurance companies from liability or make money in a variety, it's a complicated story, but if you go back through history.
Well, the germ theory was promulgated by Louis Pasteur and his German counterpart, Robert Koch. And there was a tremendous amount of opposition to it in his day. Most scientists, they didn't know what was causing disease, but a lot of them talked about poor diet or poisons or what they called a miasma, which is swamp gases.
Right.
But Pasteur said, no, it's a microbe per disease, and the microbe causes the disease. But we know from his private notes that he cheated.
Right.
He could get these bacteria, and when he exposed an animal to the bacteria, the animal didn't get sick. So that disproved his disease. But what he did was create what he called virulent bacteria, which he did by adding a lot of poisons. And then when he gave that to the animals, often by drilling a hole in their skull and putting it into their brains, that made them sick. And that was how he proved the germ theory, quote unquote. And the germ theory went right into the vaccinations. I mean, they're tied together. A good example is the anthrax, which he actually never could find a real bacteria for the anthrax. But he kept saying there was one, and then he had this vaccine, and he made a lot of money on the vaccine.
Right.
But it never worked. It never worked. In fact, it actually killed a lot of sheep. But the germ theory and vaccinations are joined at the hip, really. And
right.
The only way that we're going to get rid of this practice of vaccinating is to show that it's just not based on sound science.
Right. Understanding the central banker's reset requires understanding the lies of the pandemic and the use of healthcare laws and regulations to help engineer it. These 4 selections for the best of the Solari Report weekly interviews give you an opportunity over the holiday to get a deeper understanding of trends that will impact your time and money in the coming new year. They are excellent background for our review of the Federal Reserve and the Going Direct Reset with John Titus in the 2020 annual wrap-up, which will begin publication in January. On behalf of the entire Solari team, we wish you a very Merry Christmas and a happy and prosperous New Year.